completed for you. Okay, we are going to talk about dental waxes. Okay, what all it includes, introduction, definition. Okay, why we need dental waxes? Wax in one of mix. Like examples has INLAY pattern wax, boxing wax has an impression before it is poured in a dental stone, making an impression for registration of occlusal bites, waxes. All this is possible because waxes are thermo without decomposition bits. This is the most important property of your waxes, what you should be keeping in mind. Waxes are thermoplastic materials. What do you mean by thermoplastic materials? Which can get plasticized or which can flow when heated to a greater or higher temperatures. Okay, which are solids at room temperature but melt without decomposition to form mobile liquids. The most important thing here is without decomposition. Suppose if it undergoes decomposition, then there is no use of using your waxes. Okay. So what are the definition? What is the definition of waxes? Can everybody see? One of the several esters of fatty acids with higher alcohols, usually monohydric alcohols. This is according to your GPD definition 8. Waxes are one of the several esters of fatty acids with higher alcohols, usually monohydric alcohols. Okay. Another definition is a low molecular weight esters of fatty acids derived from natural or synthetic components. Understood? Okay. What does it contain? That means what is the structure of your waxes? The two main principal groups of organic compounds are hydrocarbons and esters. Though some contains alcohols and acids as well. Most mineral waxes have their chief constituents as hydrocarbons ranging from 17 to over 44 carbon atoms. Okay, there. I'll tell you in the next. Okay. Coming to your components. Okay, this is based on the source of you're deriving your waxes. So there are natural waxes which are occurring in nature, synthetic waxes and additives. Only waxes cannot be used, so some additives should be added. Those are your stearic acid and glycerol tristearate. Okay, oils are turpentine and colorant. Natural resins are copal, dammer, shellac, matix, and kauri. Synthetic resins are polyethylene, polystyrene, and L-wax. Okay, those are your additives. What are your additives? In your additives, you have fats, oils, natural resins, and synthetic resins. Okay. Coming to the main composition of your components of your wax, from which they are derived, they are natural waxes and synthetic waxes. This is one classification which you have to write. Suppose if it is asked as main question or in 4 marks. Okay. Usually in your natural, it can be obtained from minerals, it can be obtained from plants, and it can be obtained from your insects and animals. Synthetic waxes are usually byproducts of your refineries. That means when you're heating your oils and all, then what you get is your refinery. From your refinery, what you get is your synthetic waxes. Mainly, mineral waxes are paraffin, resin, Montan, Brandal, crystalline, microcrystalline, and Ozokerite. Okay. In this, your paraffin and resin are most commonly naturally occurring, obtained from your minerals. What are most commonly used? Paraffin and resin. Okay. Coming from your naturally derived from plants, which are derived from your plants are Carbantula, Candelilla, Ouricury, Japan wax, and cocoa butter. From your insects or animals, you have 2 waxes. Those are your beeswax and Spermaceti. Okay. This is one classification which you have to write in your components of your natural of your waxes. It can be broadly divided as natural and synthetic. Again, in your natural, it can be derived from your minerals, plants, and insects. Coming to your synthetic waxes, Acra wax, aerosol OT, castor wax, Albacet, and Dura wax. Okay, these are the additives which usually we add. Hello, these are the
Yes.
additives. Okay, these are the doubt unte adagandamma. These are the additives usually which we add to all the waxes. Okay, one thing which you should be very clear in your dental waxes is it is different from your natural waxes. How it is different? Only a single, suppose if you take a paraffin or Crescine or Montan or Carbanola, Candela or something, any wax, whatever you take, a single wax cannot suit to all your dental use. So what you will take? You will take a mixture of waxes in your dental waxes. That is the difference between your waxes which are obtained from your natural or synthetic, or waxes which are used in dentistry. Okay, waxes which are used in dentistry are usually a mixture of all these waxes. The only thing what is changing here is, depending on the use, the composition is going to change and the number of waxes are going to change. But one thing which is common is your additives. Okay, that will give you the stability and enough structure for your bulk for your waxes. How are they divided into natural and synthetic? Again, in your naturals, you have minerals, plants, and insects. Okay. Okay. Coming to your paraffin wax. Most of the time, in your main examination or in your university examination, you can surely expect a 4 marks or 1-2 marks from your dental waxes. It is a very small chapter. If you study well, you can easily score the marks. Usually ask for 2 marks or 1-2 marks, and or what for 1 short notes. Rarely it will come as a essay. Okay. Most of the time, what they will ask is paraffin wax, INLAY wax, and all this. So whatever they're asking, well, telling you. Okay. Most dental waxes contain 40 to 60% of your paraffin wax. It is a mineral wax obtained from refined crude oil, high boiling fraction of petroleum, white, transparent, relatively soft with melting. Present towards the melting point, paraffin wax is used in dentistry. Usually have a greater percentage, which is lesser than 0.5% of your oil. They crystallize in the form of plates, needles, and crystals, but are usually of type. Okay. Microcrystalline waxes. They are similar to your paraffin, but obtained from a heavier oil fractions, have higher melting points, crystallize in small particles, and are tougher and more flexible than paraffin. Less volume is used to increase the melting range and hardness the flow of your paraffin. The most important thing what we have to see or what we have to keep in mind in your about your dental waxes is about the flow and thermal coefficient. That means change in amount of heating it, because this is we are telling about plastic material, so it's obviously used when it is in liquid form. Okay. The next wax is your Crescine. Crescine is a term that describes waxes from distillates of natural minerals, petroleum, and lignite refinings. Higher molecular weights and harder than your other hydrocarbon waxes, has greater affinity for oils, increased melting range of. It is usually added to increase the melting range of your paraffin. Next is your Ozokerite. Typically a white earth wax extracted from Ouricury waxy mineral mixture found near petroleum deposits. Replaces parts of the paraffin to modify toughness and carving characteristics of the wax, greater affinity for oils. See, whenever you are talking about different waxes, They are usually added to your paraffin to modify the melting range or to get into desired characteristics. Your Ozokerite is added to get your carving characteristics of the wax. Understood? So most of the waxes are filled with paraffin, that is with your 40 to 60% of all your dental waxes are filled with or contains 40 to 60% of paraffin. Next comes your Montan wax. It is a hard wax obtained from extraction of certain different types of lignite or brown coal, have higher molecular weight. As a result, Montan wax is hard and brittle and lustrous. Improve hardness and melting range of paraffin. Understood? Next comes your Carnauba wax, which is an animal wax. It is known as the queen of waxes. One of the purest waxes usually comes in the form of hard yellow and brown flakes obtained from the leaves of Carnauba plants by collecting and drying them, beating them to loosen the wax, and then refining and bleaching the wax. Increases the hardness and melting range of paraffin, imparts glossy surface. So your up till here it is mineral waxes obtained naturally. From here it is your plant waxes. Okay. Next is your Candelilla wax, contains 40 to 60% of paraffin hydrocarbons, increases the hardness. Leaves of the small Candelilla shrub native to North Mexico and the southern western US. It is usually added to paraffin to partially or entirely replace Carnauba wax. Its melting point is lower and it is not as hard as Carnauba wax. Okay, these are different properties of different waxes. So whatever desired property you need to have, based on that, your composition of waxes are going to change. Ouricury wax, it is a brown colored wax obtained from the leaves of a Brazilian feather palm by scraping the leaf surface, imparts glossiness, increases the melting range and hardness. Next is your Japan wax or your cocoa butter. They are not true wax and sticky material, improves tackifying ability. Cocoa butter is brittle and used to protect against dehydration of soft tissues. Next comes your insects or animal wax. In this you have beeswax and spermaceti, derived from the secretion that bees use to build honeycombs, usually called as insect wax. Is a complex mixture of esters plus saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbons and organic acids. It is brittle at room temperature and plastic at body temperature. Mainly used to modify properties of paraffin, main component of sticky wax. Your beeswax is the main component of your sticky wax. Sticky wax, you might have seen, it is in yellow color. Spermaceti wax, it is obtained from the sperms of whales, mainly esters, used as a coating in manufacturing of dental floss. Dental floss, you might have heard, it is used as a thread which is coated with wax. Usually it is a dental oral prophylactic or useful for removing your food debris or anything between your teeth. Usually you will have a thread. Dental floss is a thread which is coated with wax. Even in threads, you can use your normal thread also, but because it is coated with dental waxes, it is not going to impinge on your soft tissue. So any interdental or in between there is food obstruction or food lodgement, that can be removed through your wax floss. Next comes your synthetic waxes. They are complex organic compounds produced by reaction with natural waxes, more refined than your natural waxes. Used in dental formulations is limited as they have limited compatibility with other waxes. So most of the time what we are using paraffin wax to that, and it contains 40 to 60% of all your dental waxes, and the other waxes are added based on the use or method of fabrication your of use in dentistry. You are going to modify your other waxes composition. Your synthetic waxes are of not much used in your dentistry. So synthetic waxes, halogenated hydrocarbon waxes, hydrogenated waxes, polyoxyethylene waxes are polymers of ethylene glycol and functions as plasticizers and toughen films of wax. Next comes your resins. Naturals such as gummer and kauri are compatible with most natural waxes and produce harder products. Synthetic resins like polyethylene are added to improve their toughness and melting range. Copal is a natural brittle resin. So what are the properties? With that, we're going to complete about the classification of waxes and the different waxes that are available from your natural and your synthetic. Okay. Coming to the properties of your waxes. Most of the time, you'll always talk about the melting range, coefficient of thermal expansion, transition temperatures, mechanical properties, flow, and residual stresses. Whenever you're talking about waxes, all these 5 things should be, properties of waxes should be kept in mind. It is about the melting range because it is a thermoplastic material, you are going to heat it. So when you are going to heat it, it should not get decomposed. Even though in the definition we are told it is not getting decomposed when you are heating it to higher temperatures. But if you heat it to very high temperatures, obviously your waxes are going to get decomposed. Understood? So your melting range is very important. And expansion and because you are heating, obviously from your room temperature, when you are heating it, it is becoming from solid to liquid. And obviously you will have a coefficient of thermal expansion. Transition temperatures, mechanical properties, and one more important property is your flow of your dental waxes and the residual stresses. You are fabricating a wax pattern and sometimes there are some stresses which are present that will result in cracking of your wax pattern. Okay. What is the melting range? Waxes have a melting range rather than melting point. That means they have a degree of variation instead of a melting point. At this point, it is not going to melt. It is going to melt from 44 to 60 degrees, 62 degrees for your paraffin. And for your Carnauba, it is from 50 degrees to 90 degrees centigrade. What is the significance? Mixing of waxes can change their melting range. That is what we do. Okay. Here, one more important thing about what you should remember in your melting ranges, it is not all the waxes are having a melting range rather than a melting point. Range is different between, that means you are going to give 2 values. In between that, it is going to melt. If you're talking about melting point, that means at that particular temperature, it should melt. But that is not in the case with your dental waxes. Abdullah, hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next important property is your coefficient of thermal expansion. Waxes expand when there is an increase in temperature and contract when there is a decrease in temperature. Dental waxes have highest coefficient of thermal expansion than any other restorative materials. This is one point which should be noted. Waxes expand when there is an increase in temperature and contract when there is a decrease in temperature. Dental waxes have the highest coefficient of thermal expansion than any other restorative materials. Okay. So what is the significance of that? Your set of inlay wax are high enough that temperature changes in wax pattern after establishment of critical dimension relationship may serve as a major contributing factor in inaccuracy of your finished restoration. What does it mean is, suppose you are fabricating a wax pattern in this summer season. In the morning, it might be around 27 degrees. But when it comes to the afternoon, okay, the temperature is rising to around 40 degrees, 42 degrees, or 50 degrees. It may range. And again, when in the evening, it's coming back again to 28 degrees or 30 degrees. So when we have talked before about the melting range, if you have seen, it is from 44 to 62 and from 50 to 90 degrees. So if you fabricate a wax pattern and keep it outside, okay, and if there is a change in atmospheric temperature, so what will happen? Obviously, they will lead into inaccuracy. Once because of the thermal expansion, coefficient of thermal expansion. If there is a change or inaccuracy, obviously the final restoration what you get will also have a dimensional change, and it will result in inaccuracy or increased or decreased effect of the processes. So on why your coefficient of thermal expansion is important in your waxes. Next is your transition temperatures. Many wax exhibit at least two rates of expansion between 22 to 52 degrees centigrade. These changes in rate of expansion occurs at a transition point. At these points, the internal structure parts become more free to move and rotate, and so expand more. Because the ingredient waxes undergo transition that do not coincide with one another, inlay waxes exhibit more than two changes in rate of expansion. So what is your transition temperature is? At one particular temperature, there is a high degree of expansion. Okay, that temperature is called your, at that point on that temperature is called your transition temperature. Usually your expansion, obviously there will be an expansion when you are going to heat it. When you are going to decrease the temperature or when it is cooling, obviously you will have a contraction. When you are heating it, from 22 degrees to 62 degrees or say any other range, okay, what will happen? There might be from 22 degrees up till 44 degrees. There might be a slight increase in thermal coefficient of thermal expansion or expansion. But when it is heated from 52 degrees to 62 degrees, the same rate of expansion will not. That is about your, at that point from which the expansion will be more is your transition temperature. Next comes to your flow. Measure of flow is a measure of degree of plastic deformation of a material at a given temperature. That is, what is flow? A plastic deformation of a material is called your flow. Okay. A greater flow of above 50 degrees centigrade or above your 36 degrees centigrade due to internal stresses. This is the significance of your flow. Before we have talked that there will be an increased deformation or increased rate of expansion. That is because if that happens, obviously the flow of the wax or above is used to record your oral details. Suppose if it is less than 37 degrees, then you cannot work it on the patient's mouth. But what is the importance here is negligible flow, that is degrees centigrade. Because of this, distortion due to internal stresses will get reduced. Understood? So if you are fabricating a wax pattern at higher temperatures, and again you are asking it, you are bringing down the temperature. Once you have laid the recorded or made a wax pattern, then again you are leaving it like that. Then the temperature is going to come down slowly, and when it's coming down, what is happening? It is becoming more stable. Understood? The flow nature is getting reduced. Because of this property only, we are able to use waxes for your fabrication. Next important mechanical properties of your compressive strength, proportional limit, and elastic modulus of your waxes are very low. These properties strongly depend on the temperatures. As the temperature decreases, mechanical properties improve. Okay. Next comes your residual stresses. In the upper flow, residual stresses, decreased residual stresses. So residual stresses are always exist in a pre-prepared wax pattern. That means you are heating it to a higher temperatures. Obviously, the flow is more. The other properties are going to get increased. As the temperature is decreased, your other mechanical properties like your compressive strength, your elastic modulus and all will reduce. Okay. So when they are getting minimized, so what will happen, because you are fabricating at higher temperatures, to minimize the distortion, that means change. Okay, use higher temperatures at the time of formation and less force to shape, because when you are trying to fabricate a wax pattern, you have to create the shape. When you are creating the shape, you have to use less force. ఇది చెప్తే అర్థం కాదు, wax pattern చేసినప్పుడు చూస్తే మీకు అర్థం అవుతుంది. That means when the wax is at room temperature, it is at solid state. But when you have to fabricate a wax pattern, or when you have to fabricate one shape, you have to get a desired shape. What you do, you will melt the wax. That means you will heat the wax to higher temperatures. At that temperatures, obviously, all your properties are going to get. There is more chances of distortion, more chances of thermal expansion, more compressive stresses are there, more residual stresses are there. Okay, so what you have to do, you should not put excess pressure while you are fabricating the wax pattern. That is what, to minimize the distortion, use higher temperatures at the time of formation, less force to shape or to reduce the residual stresses. Soften the wax uniformly at 50 degrees for 15 minutes, and warm carving instrument and die should be used. Obviously, the wax pattern also should be uniformly heated and softened at 50 degrees for 15 minutes, so that the residual stresses and all are getting minimized. One more instruments are called PKT carvers. Not the carver what you use for your BDH. Okay, these are called PKT carvers. PK Thompson has given that, so they are called PKT carvers. Also should be, so that everything will be at higher temperatures. And what is a die? If you have remembered, there's a difference between a cast, a model, and a die. What is a die? A die is a single prepared all these wax patterns and all we will do for your FPD. Okay, so when you are doing it for your FPD, you are going to prepare the tooth and take the impression. So prepared tooth on the cast is called your die. So even your die should be heated. That means your cast or that single portion which can be, that should be heated. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So all these are your mechanical or your properties which you should be, remember: expansion, transition temperature, flow, and your mechanical properties and your residual stresses. Okay. Next comes your classification of dental waxes. I will just tell you about the classification. We'll go in detail. Classification of dental waxes. This is based on the application. Previously also we have told about components, and that in that classification we have told it is natural and synthetic. Again, in your natural it is mineral, plant and animal or insect, and your synthetic, here it is based on your use in your dentistry. Okay, so only these are called your dental waxes. How it is classified? Pattern wax, processing wax, and impression wax. So your classification of dental wax is based on the application in dentistry. It is classified as pattern wax, processing wax, and impression wax. Under your pattern wax, you will have casting wax, inlays wax, and base plate wax. Under your processing wax, you will have boxing wax, utility wax, sticky wax, carding wax, and all those. Okay. Impression wax is usually used for correcting your impression or corrective impression waxes and bite registration waxes. Agoinamma, based on how is your dental waxes classified? Based on your application in dentistry, they are classified as pattern waxes, processing waxes, and impression waxes. In your pattern wax, you have casting wax, inlay wax, and base plate wax. When it comes to your processing wax, it is boxing wax, utility wax, sticky wax. Second year వచ్చారు, ఫస్ట్ ఇయర్ లో BDN బాక్సింగ్ ఏమైనా చేశారమ్మా?
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
ఓకే. ఇంప్రెషన్ తీసారా?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
ఇంప్రెషన్ కాంపౌండ్ తో ఇంప్రెషన్ తీసారా కాస్ట్ మీద?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
ఆ ఇంప్రెషన్ కాంపౌండ్ తో ఇంప్రెషన్ తీసిన తర్వాత దానికి బీడింగ్ అండ్ బాక్సింగ్ అని చేస్తాం. దాని అన్నిటికీ వ్యాక్స్ వాడతాం. అక్లూజల్ రిమ్స్ చేశారు కదా సెకండ్ ఇయర్ లో.
Yes, sir. Sir.
So that is your modeling wax. Okay, that will come under your processing wax. Okay, cutting wax and all. Your teeth set, if you have seen your teeth set, okay, your teeth are arranged and kept in one box. Okay, your teeth are stable there. There is a wax that is attached. That wax is called your cutting wax. It will come under your processing wax. Another wax is based on your used in dentistry is your impression wax. That is used for your impression. Instead of impression, you can slightly add wax there and fill any defects, minor defects which have come. You can fill it with wax. Understood? That wax is called your corrective impression wax. Suppose you are using it for bite registration, then it is called bite registration wax. అర్థమైందమ్మా ఇక్కడ దాకా? హలో?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. These are the pattern wax, processing wax and impression wax. ఆ రెండు టీత్ ఉన్నప్పుడు ఏం చేస్తాం అంటే పేషెంట్ ఎలా కొరుకుతున్నాడు అని చూడటానికి మూడో ఫోటో. ఓకే, పేషెంట్ ఎలా కొరుకుతున్నాడు అని చూడటానికి వ్యాక్స్ పెట్టి బయట తీసుకుంటాం. దాన్ని సేమ్ ఆర్టికులేషన్ కి వాడుకోవచ్చు. ఓకే, ఇక ప్రాసెసింగ్ వ్యాక్స్ అంటే చూడండి అక్కడ బీడింగ్ కి వాడారు. ఇంప్రెషన్ ట్రేకి ఇంప్రెషన్ తీసిన తర్వాత దానికి సల్కస్ టు మెయింటైన్ ది recorded sulcus, functional width and depth of the sulcus, you are using a wax that is called your beading wax that will create the land area of the cast. Okay, pattern wax ante chudandi akkada shape crown shapes lo unnai. Crown shape you can see the occlusal morphology and all that. Okay, so they are different crowns. Those are called usually used for your FPDs. Okay, those are called your pattern wax. Don't get confused. Pattern wax is different. Paraffin wax is different. Okay. Attendance తీసుకోండమ్మా. ఎవరికి అర్థమైందా? హలో? ఓకే. క్లియర్ ఉన్నారా?
1. Roll number 1. 3.
Present.
2 present.
3. 4. 5.
5 present.
6.
Present.
7.
Present.
8. Present. 9.
Present.
11. Sorry, 10,
10 present.
11,
Present.
12,
Don't
13,
wait, man.
Present.
14,
Present.
15, 16,
Present.
17,
Present.
18,
Present.
19,
Present.
20,
Present.
21,
Present.
22,
Present.
23,
Present.
24,
Present.
25,
Present.
26,
Present.
27,
Present.
28,
Present.
29,
Present.
30,
Present.
31,
Present.
32,
Present.
33,
Present.
34,
Present.
35,
Present.
36,
Present.
37,
Present.
38,
Present.
40,
Present.
41,
Present.
42, 42, 43, 44,
Present.
45,
Present.
46,
Present.
47,
Present.
48,
Present.
49,
Present.
50,
Present.
51,
Present.
52,
Present.
53,
Present.
54,
Present.
55,
Present.
56,
Present.
57,
Present.
58,
Present.
59, 60,
Present.
61,
Present.
62, 62, 63,
Present.
64,
Present.
65,
Present.
66,
Present.
67,
Present.
68,
Present.
69,
Present.
70,
Present.
71,
Present.
72,
Present.
73,
Present.
24.
Present. Three present.
Okay. 4, 12, 15, 42, 59, 62.
4 present. 12 present.
15,
50 present.
15, 15, 42, 59, 62. Sir, done, sir.
56 present.
Okay.
ఒకసారి చాట్ బాక్స్ లో అబ్సెంటీస్ నంబర్ పేరు రాయండి అమ్మా. వాళ్ళు కూడా చూసుకుంటారు. ఏమేంటమ్మా అబ్సెంటీస్?
15, 42, 59, 62, sir.
15,
42,
42,
59,
9,
62.
2,
62, sir. That's all.
అదమ్మా 2. స్టార్టింగ్ లో 2 కూడా ప్రెసెంట్ అమ్మా. జస్ట్ రైట్ దేర్ నేమ్స్ నో. 15 ఎవరు?
Suvarna Teja, sir.
వాట్సాప్ పెట్టేస్తామా?
Okay, sir.
దీనిలోనే పెట్టే పేర్లు దీనిలో రాసే. Suvarna okay. Rata, 42.
Nikhil, sir.
Okay. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Leave.
Sir.